Alright guys, I have a very fun video for you today. So go ahead, get your laundry basket or whatever you're doing while you're listening to me. But I'm going to do a Q&A. You guys gave me a lot of questions and a lot of things to chat about. I am also going to be bringing in a special guest into this video. I invited my husband to join me for several of your questions because several of them involved him. And he will be joining me towards the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. Also, if you are interested in the answer to a specific question or specific topic, I'm going to put timestamps in the description down below. So check those out so that you don't miss the answer to the question that you are most interested in. With no further ado, let's get started because I have a lot of questions I'm going to try to get to as many as I can today. First of all, I was asked to share a little bit about why we live abroad and how homeschool is viewed here and what kind of community we have here, kind of a little bit of that story, why we live abroad. And it's true that's something I don't talk about a whole lot. I do try to stick pretty firmly to my niche of homeschooling here, but the very short story of it is I was born in Michigan. I've shared that many times before. I'm a Michigan girl. Born there, spent my early childhood years there. My family moved around, several major moves during my growing up years. Then I moved back to Michigan for college. I got married in Michigan and in college to my husband. And it was actually my husband's decision and leading for us to move overseas. And we've been living overseas for about a decade. A lot of people are kind of surprised by that because they expect that it was me kind of leading the way because my family was already overseas. But no, it was actually him and it was me following his leading and his decision. I was very happy to, but he instigated the move. Now, as to why we stay, because it's been a very long, 10 years is a long time to live overseas. As to why we stay, my husband has a really great job. It's not a glamorous or super amazing high-powered job. He works at a school, but it's a job that just fits his passions and his skills and his expertise so perfectly and well. It feels like a job just perfectly made for him and he's perfectly made for it. So that's a big part of it, that's a big part of why anyone lives anywhere, where your job is, where your work and vocation is. We also do have family here. That's something pretty special. A lot of people who are living internationally don't get to live close to family, but we do. Being able to live here, being able to see my sisters grow up and be a part of their everyday lives is very, very special to me. We also have an amazing community. In a way, I feel like raising our kids here in Southeast Asia kind of in some ways feels like going back in time and raising them in a little bit further back in time, just with the small town kind of community that we have here. This is the kind of community where if my kids are climbing the walls outside and uncle walking down the street will scold them and say, "Get off the wall, boys, you're gonna break your heads." So uncles and aunties will tell my kids what to do, which, hey, sometimes you need some help from the community. And sometimes your kids are climbing the walls when they know they're not supposed to. Just the other day, my kids were playing outside and they come in running with a box of cake, and our neighbor had come and given them a box of cake randomly through the gate of our little home. And I love that. I feel like that doesn't happen as much in the West anymore. I love the way that people interact with kids here. I love the caring between different people in the communities. It's a great place. It's been a great place to raise a family. I'm really, really thankful for our home, for our community. Also, and again, I don't talk about this much because I mostly stick to homeschool, but I'm also involved with operating a small learning support center, which is run as a business, although it's more like a business. It is an official business. It's not a profitable business because it's really much more of a passion project from the people involved versus designed to make money. But it works with educating kids who need extra support, supporting families who need extra support. Sometimes it's homeschool families, sometimes it's kids in traditional school, sometimes it's kids with a specific goal to get into a certain school, but they need help in a certain area. So it's always looked different. My involvement has looked different in different seasons of the past decade here, but it's been a constant that I've been able to use my skills in teaching and my interest in supporting families in learning in that way and through that learning center. So that's another thing. My husband has a job here that fits him very well. I also have roles here that fit me and my skills very well. So we have called this place home for a long time, and we're very grateful for every year that we get to continue to make our home here. And yes, homeschooling is legal here. There are homeschoolers in our local area. It's not super common. It is still fairly rare, kind of unexpected to be homeschooling, but it's also like people don't think anything bad of it. They're just like, oh, homeschool, okay. So yeah, that's a little bit about my life overseas. All right, next question. Do you use tests, and how do you know if your child is ahead or behind? So it depends on what kind of tests you're talking about. If you're talking about tests that are just naturally incorporated into curriculum and learning, absolutely I will use tests. I'm not opposed to those at all. I'll use spelling tests. I'll use math tests. My children are still pretty little, so most curriculum doesn't do a whole lot of testing at this stage, although I've also found that testing can be kind of motivating for my son, so sometimes I'll just declare, hey, today we're doing a reading test. And that's very exciting for him, and he'll be really focused on not making a mistake with any words. I am not at all opposed to that kind of testing. Standardized testing has never been something really on my radar. It wasn't a big part of my life growing up. We did do the SAT, ACT tests in preparation for college, but I don't come from a state that requires standardized testing for homeschoolers. So for me, it costs extra money. Doesn't really feel like something I would bother doing, but that's also because I am very, very comfortable with knowing, what I need to teach my child next. Rolling along, I do feel like I have a very good handle on what a child does know and what they don't know. As to how I tell if my child is ahead or behind, people will say there's no ahead or behind. That's not fully true, but it's also not fully false. Kids can definitely get behind of where they could be due to lack of teaching them stuff, or they could also naturally just have a learning pace that needs extra time to get to a certain level. So I think it's more important to know where your child is at and where you need to get them to versus knowing if they're ahead or behind, if that makes sense, if that distinction is clear. I'd rather know where a kid is at and where I'm going with them. And I do have a lot of experience with education. That's been a part of my life for a long time. So it's very easy for me to know if a child is where I want them to be at this stage, or if I need to press in a little bit harder on a certain topic to give them extra support in mastering it, I will do that. But I'm not really the type to worry if a child is ahead or behind or necessarily on that. But I do believe in knowing what they know and giving them the support they need to get to the next step in mastering in whatever path or trajectory they're on. All right, the next question is, how do you budget for your homeschool, and how do you and your husband agree on what amount is appropriate? I will invite my husband to share on this question from his perspective later in this video. But from my perspective, I do not have a set budget for how much to spend on homeschool every year. The way we approach budgeting is we budget for all of our known monthly expenses, known regular things that are part of every month, all the bills, the food, everything. We have all of that aspect of our budget, and then any money beyond that goes into different savings buckets, as it were, and we have a semi-long-term savings bucket that is used for those expenses that are going to happen, but they're not monthly, they're not super regular, and they can kind of come up irregularly. So that is where our homeschool budget comes from, is out of that savings bucket. And that's also used for like when you need new tires for the car. You're gonna need those at some point, but it's not necessarily regular when you need those, or when your washing machine breaks and we need a new washing machine. That's where we keep the money that will go toward those types of irregular purchases. So that's where school shopping supplies comes out of, and I do purchase irregularly because I tend to shop when we have opportunities to get things from the US, either if we're going there or if we have visitors coming here from the US. Now, we don't have any set amount on what we can spend or what we will spend. Education is very important to us. It has a very high value. It's worth spending money on, in my opinion. However, I also am a very naturally thrifty person. So I am the person who looks for the sales, waits for the sales, who thinks very carefully before investing in a resource, and who thinks about what am I most likely to use and spends on that. I have my preferences. I'm much more likely to spend money on a curriculum that I can use with my first son, and then my second, and then my third, and I can pass it to my sister so she can use it with her baby, and then, trade it back, pass a textbook to a friend and get it back. That kind of resource I'm more likely to spend money on versus the subscription type services where you're constantly paying every month. I kind of like being able to buy something once and get a whole lot of use out of it. That is my typical preference for how I spend my money. So I do have that natural thrifty streak, but at the same time, I'm not gonna get the $50 curriculum instead of the $75 curriculum when I really believe that the $75 curriculum is the one I want and the one that's going to be more effective. So price is not my ultimate value, and I'm not ultimately going to always choose the cheapest thing, but I do try to get very good value for what I spend my money on. Now the next question is related. It's how do you avoid the curriculum over purchase pitfall? And there's a side question with it. I imagine because of your channel, many will send you their curriculum for you to give a review. First of all, my answer to that question is connected to the first one. I am naturally thrifty. I'm the kind of person who thinks through a purchase for quite a while before investing in it. I like to get one thing that's good quality and just make it last versus a dozen things. I'll think for a while, I'll get one good pair of shoes and then wear them for years. So my natural personality, I think, helps avoid the over-purchasing pitfall. I also do have a video that I've made in the past on how to not overbuy or have buyer's remorse when it comes to your homeschool. So I'm going to link to that down below so you can check out that video. And then as to the second part of the question about lots of companies sending me curriculum to review on my amazing YouTube channel, I did want to address that because actually that probably happens a lot less than you might think that it does. I do occasionally accept curriculum for a review, and I always disclose that very clearly, but it's actually pretty rare. Most of the curriculum I use, most of the curriculum that I review on this channel is curriculum that either I, myself, or my mom has purchased, and we've purchased it for our own use with our own money. I am an affiliate with several curriculums. I appreciate very much when you purchase through my links. I do like to work with curriculums in different ways when I have that chance, but in large part because I live overseas, I think I'm not a very appealing partner for a lot of curriculum companies. I've had companies reach out to me and show interest in partnering with me, and I respond back with, okay, I may be interested, but I want to let you know up front, I live overseas. And then they're like, oh no, wait, sorry, we don't want to deal with that. And I'm like, I very much understand. I wouldn't want to deal with international shipping either. So most of my reviews are of curriculum that I've purchased, that I've worked hard to bring over to our home here overseas, and that I've really used in my homeschool. Because of the hard work it takes to get curriculum here in the first place, I'm usually really do my due diligence before getting it over here as much as I can. And then on the note of how we profit or make a benefit from reviews, I am an affiliate with several companies. I appreciate it when you use those. I also do get ad revenue here on YouTube. All of your favorite YouTubers who have a larger audience do get revenue from the ads here on YouTube if they are monetizing their channels. And I just do want to thank you very much for taking the time to watch these videos. The revenue that I make from YouTube ads actually goes towards paying the rent and keeping the lights on at the learning center that I help run and operate here. So I do want to thank you for that. You guys watching my videos allows me to help support a place that I'm very passionate about, a place that I think really has a lot of benefit here in our local community. And I kind of started YouTube with the idea of, hey, maybe I can use this avenue of talking to other moms about homeschool to help support this other avenue in which I support education and kids in their learning endeavors as well. So thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for helping me to make this small income here through YouTube. I truly do appreciate that. And now the next question. Growing up, did your mom filter all the books that you would read on your free time, or were you allowed to read whatever? I would kind of say no on both fronts. She did not pre-read books. I was a very voracious reader. There was no way she could have done that. But we also didn't read just whatever. I read a ton growing up. Most of what I read were books that were in our house, and my mom herself had been a very voracious reader. In her youth, she was kind of busy with a lot of kids when I was there. But she had been a very voracious reader, so she had read pretty much all the books in our house. Most of the books we were given by relatives, so they were giving them with some knowledge of what was in the book. So it wasn't that she didn't know what we were reading or we were reading whatever. But she also adapted her, she would adapt her approach by kid, and she knew that I had the sense to put down a book if it was garbage. She raised us with that sense. She raised us to know not to think that, oh, if a book has a bad word in it or a kid doing something bad, I can't read this book. There's a difference. There's a difference between a book that contains something bad, something ugly, versus a truly ugly book. And for me, that's where the distinction would lie. It's like a book that is true ugliness is not one that I'm gonna read, that I'm gonna invest that time into and invest my mind into. But there can be ugliness in a book and it can still be a really worthwhile read. I think actually the books growing up that had the heaviest and most difficult to wrestle with content were actually Sunlight books. If any of you guys have used Sunlight in high school, they include some really heavy and challenging books. They include A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. They've actually maybe changed their book list, so I don't know if they include some of these books anymore, but A Tree Grows in Brooklyn was one that I remember. It has some really difficult content. It has some ugly content in it, but it's a really powerful book. It's one that has stuck with me over the years, one that I've actually read several times in the years since high school, gone back and reread it. But I would actually say the books that probably had the most heaviest content or most difficult content, glimpses of ugliness, were actually in Sunlight books because they don't shy away from including books with that type of content. And I actually think books can be well-written, good, genuinely good books, can be a good place for our children to experience some of that ugliness of the world, experience it and talk about it with us. So that's kind of the same philosophy that I bring into thinking of my children as readers of their own on the future. I do want to raise them with the sense to distinguish between a book that is ugly, just a book full of ugliness, versus a book that has ugly things happening in it. The next question is, what types of activities would you try to do with younger gifted children with perfectionism? And here, I wouldn't really say that I have fun activities to suggest. I would just suggest cultivate a family culture and a family worldview that does not cater to perfectionism, that does not reward perfectionism or try to suggest that perfectionism is a great way to live. I would really try to create a family culture that values growth mindset, that values challenge, that values doing hard things. In your family, try to make it really clear that you guys as a family, you value doing hard things and challenging yourselves and learning how to grow and improve versus just getting everything right. I like to communicate very clearly to my kids that if everything I ask them to do is easy for them, I'm not doing my job. I'm not doing my job as a teacher or as a mom. I do need to be including challenges, gentle challenges in their lives, but also communicating, I'm right here. I'm gonna be walking right through this with you. It might feel hard, but you are not doing it alone. But I'm not gonna let you just rest on what you already can accomplish. We're gonna be continuing to pursue growth together. The next question is, how do you incorporate outdoor free play and play dates during the week? Now, my husband and I lived in an apartment for quite a long time. Then we purposely moved into a house just a couple years ago, that has some outdoor space, that has a yard. It's not a yard in the Michigan sense of a yard, but it's a walled-in outside space that's mostly cement and has a little patch of grass. But it is an outdoor place where the kids can play safely while I'm cooking in the outdoor kitchen or doing general housework. And moving to a house has been great for incorporating more of this outdoor play for our kids, because in the apartment, We had to like totally leave the whole apartment building, lock up everything, come down, go and find a patch of grass to play in. And they also couldn't dig holes in the grass because it didn't belong to us. Here in our little patch of grass, if they want to dig holes, they can dig to their heart's content, and they usually do. Just being able to get this house, which is one that we're very grateful for. We are renters, so we know we may not be able to be here for super long, but even just having a couple years here with a nice, safe outdoor place for my kids to play is really, really nice. Something I'm very thankful for. And pretty much as soon as we're done with breakfast, morning story time, every day they just run straight outside and they're playing out in our little yard right in the morning. It is very hot where we live, so nobody pretty much wants to be out during the heat of the day hours. So they're playing out in the morning. I mean, sometimes my kids are the ones brave enough and crazy enough to still be out in the middle of the day for a little bit, but that usually doesn't last very long. Then more toward the evening, once my husband gets home from work, they pretty frequently, once he's home from work, once we've cleaned up dinner, they have a routine that he'll take them out and they'll just go to the neighborhood park, or they'll go to another neighborhood park. They know all the parks around here, all the little playgrounds, or they'll go to the beach or just some little local outdoor area. So that's kind of how we handle outdoor time. Play dates, as like anybody does. We have our friends. I don't have a car, and I'm also pretty busy during school days, so we don't tend to do so much during the week, but evenings or weekends, we'll get together, go swimming with friends, or have people over, just like normal. How do you find ways to interest your preschooler and establish a good routine? The way I establish a good routine is I just keep a good routine. For me, habit is very important. I thrive with routine. My kids thrive with routine, so we don't tend to change things up much here in this house. My preschooler knows what's going to happen every day because it's been generally the same for as long as he can remember. We don't do huge dramatic changes. Like, we do have times of year when we're doing something different, Christmas break, or we're going on vacation, or we're traveling. But in general, if we're here and at home and it's part of the normal school year, we're just doing the next thing. We're getting up, having breakfast, doing our stories. He knows what to expect. So I think knowing what to expect is a big part of what keeps him interested. It's no surprise. And I also just expect my kids to be interested in learning, because learning is fun. It's not something that I'm expecting them to not be interested in. And sometimes even if they're not initially interested, I don't let that faze me, because I know they're little kids. They don't know enough that they might not be interested in something yet because they don't know how interesting it is. But they will find out how interesting it is once I share that with them. What do you do to prepare for the SAT? Now, back in my day, we were buying these, you would buy that big giant SAT prep book that's like this thick. And you would just work through the practice tests and that. Now things have changed so much. My sister prepped mostly through Khan Academy, which is free, and doing the online practice SAT tests. So that's how times have changed from my day to hers. So you do want to do some specific test prep, but then just generally you want to have a good math education, a good solid understanding of English, and you'll be pretty solid. Now the next question is, what general subject would you outsource and why? Now for me personally, I don't tend to outsource a whole lot. Part of that is budget. Classes tend to be a more expensive way to homeschool, and they don't tend to be my preference of spending money, because once you use a class, it's gone. It's not something that you can reuse. You just are paying every time you take a class. I'm not totally against outsourcing. Probably my first approach to outsourcing would be involving family members. Hey, what can grandma teach? What can grandpa teach? As far as their specialty skill sets, involving family members and their passions and their skills to teach specific things. I'm not saying I'm totally opposed to outsourcing. It's just something where I would really weigh the cost, and I would more use it under very specific circumstances versus being very quick to turn to outsourcing. I am a very confident teacher. I consider myself a very skilled teacher. Side note, gifted individuals do tend to be fairly confident in themselves. I know it can come across as arrogance. We don't mean it like that. This is just how we're wired. But I am quite confident in myself as a teacher in teaching just about any general type of subject, but in the more specialty areas, if I had a child who was really interested in piano and really committed to that, or some other instrument. You know, I can play the piano, I can read music, I can teach the basics, but for a kid who really wanted to go far in that might be an area where I would be like, okay, you know, we could put some money towards getting a specific teacher for this subject, or other types of more specialty areas like that. You know, foreign language can be an area where I think having a native speaker teacher can be very beneficial. And you know, I had a fantastic Chinese professor who really ignited my love for language, so I definitely can understand and appreciate having specific, passionate, highly skilled teachers in certain subjects. A question I got was, do your boys ever show frustration, and how do you handle it? Yes, of course my boys are frustrated sometimes, and they show it. That's never going to be something I'm going to show on YouTube or on the internet. That's just part of what I would consider general respect and honor for our children, is we're not gonna post them on the internet when they're having a rough time. So my kids, just like pretty much all kids, have moments when they don't wanna do hard things. And that's not something that should overly dismay us or upset us as parents, because it's very, very normal. We as adults have moments when we don't wanna do hard things, or moments when we get frustrated, right, guys? We do. It shouldn't dismay us as parents, but it's also not something that we need to cater to or be like, oh, okay, you're frustrated, so frustration is okay. No, it's an area where we should and we can encourage them to grow in their muscles for handling frustrations, to exercise their muscles. So I try to treat those frustration moments as opportunities for growth, as opportunities to build their ability little by little to handle these small frustrations of childhood. So if I'm facing, I don't want to, this is too hard, I will affirm them in that feeling. I will say, like, I totally understand that you don't want to do this, but I'm not going to move from that to, okay, so you don't have to do this. If you don't want to, you don't have to. No, we don't go in that direction. I will affirm, I understand you don't want to do this. I understand that this feels really hard right now, or I understand you're frustrated. We can take a moment to calm down, you know, take a breath, hug, you know, whatever, and I'm gonna tell them, I understand it's hard. You're not gonna have to do it alone. I am right here with you. I am walking through this frustration with you. I know that you can do hard things, and I know that you can do things even when you don't want to. All of us, we all do things, we all do good things that we don't wanna do because they're worth doing. And I want you to trust Mama that what I've asked you to do is worth doing, and it is something you can do if you put your mind to it. I'm not gonna ask you to do something that's genuinely too hard. So trust Mama in this. I'm right next to you. I've got, you know, I'm with you. I'm cheering you on. We can do this. But I am going to be very firm of, nope, it's not just because you don't want to, then you get to not do something that you need to be doing. And I also try to work on, sometimes as my sons get older, I work on asking, is this something that's worth being frustrated about? And is this really worth it? Like, let's try to get some perspective on some of these small little minor issues that sometimes can have our kids in tears. Maybe not in that moment of tears, but a little while later. Like, do you think, now that you're past the moment, do you think that that was really worth the drama of that moment? And a lot of times they're able to get some perspective of, it wasn't actually that bad once I got over my emotions about it. And yeah, that's good for all of us to build some perspective in. Next question, do you plan to repeat Gentle and Classical Sequence 1 in a few years for your younger son, or more generally, are there certain curricula that you save back so both sons can equally benefit, or do you lean toward the older, let the younger absorb what they may? So this is about family style curriculum and also repeating curriculums. So for every family dynamic, it's going to look a little bit different. What is the right choice for you and your family? For me, I do not lean towards waiting to do curriculum until my second oldest is old enough to benefit from it. So like holding back on doing curriculum until the second one is old enough for it. I tend to lean towards, doing curriculum when my first is ready and very capable of doing it. And that's because of our unique family dynamic. I do have two sons very close in age, a little over 1.5 years apart, but they have very different temperaments. My oldest moves very quickly. He's very, very curious, has a lot of, energy and capacity for paying attention and for learning. He's bookish. I call him nerdy. He is a more advanced student. My youngest is he's a playful personality. He learns, he likes to listen to stories too. He wants to be a part. He always wants to be a part of what we're doing, but he's not there at the same level with his comprehension at all. And that's totally fine. I'm totally okay with that. That's who they are. I love the way that they each learn in their own unique ways. I love the way that they want to be a part of what each other is doing, but I'm not going to hold back on letting my oldest son fly in his natural progression just to be more efficient with including my younger son. And I'm happy to let my younger son be involved, but I'm also keeping in mind, probably in a couple years, I'm going to be teaching him this info in a way that works for him. And I have repeated some of the same curriculums. He was there and a part of it the first time I did Gentle and Classical Preschool and Primer, but he wasn't mastering it. He wasn't really ready for the content at the same level. Now we've gone back and we've repeated Gentle and Classical Preschool. We're doing Gentle and Classical Primer right now with him, and now he's at a level where it really is a good fit for him. And my oldest son still wants to be involved because they just love each other. They're always doing things together. But I'm not going to, for me and my family dynamic, I tend to lean towards, letting the older one progress at his own pace and doing schoolwork that's a good fit for him versus trying to wait until the younger one's ready. The next handful of questions is all going to be related to including foreign language, second languages into your homeschool curriculum. And I'm excited that you guys asked a lot of questions about this because it is something I'm very passionate about, love to chat about, and I'm excited that you guys are interested in including other languages in your homeschool. First question, do you think I could teach Spanish to my child if I don't speak any of it? If yes, how do I start? If you don't speak Spanish or if you don't speak it well, you absolutely still can be teaching Spanish and including Spanish in your homeschool. For me, I think the key is first of all, deciding on a curriculum or a plan that's going to work for you, and then being very, very consistent with it. You need the curriculum or the plan because you don't know how to speak Spanish, so you need something that's going to tell you exactly what you need to teach next, and you're going to have to find out what you like. I really like to recommend Homeschool Languages and their curriculum. It's not one that I've used, but I've looked at it, and if I was going to start Spanish from scratch and not knowing it, and my kids not knowing any, that would probably be my number one pick. So check out their curriculum if you're looking for something like that. There's also online options if that's something that you're more comfortable with, incorporating video lessons, following along with those. If you're going to use video lessons, I highly encourage you to be there watching the video with your child, finding ways to use what's taught in the video, reinforce it in your everyday life, and really, really use it. Repetition really helps build language. Also, be consistent. The reason a lot of people don't get anywhere with their foreign language learning is because they're not consistent with it. They treat it like an extra that happens way too late in the school day, and then it just gets skipped and it gets skipped and it gets skipped and it gets shoved to the side, and it's not happening consistently. So then pretty much every time you're starting your language, you're basically restarting over from scratch and you never really get anywhere. But you can get somewhere with consistency. Consistency is the magic key to take you where you want to be. Be consistent with including it. Use a really high quality tool, the one that fits your homeschooling approach the best. There are multiple good options out there. There's not just one, but look for a good curriculum or a good plan that you can follow and that's going to teach you alongside your kid. Make it a family thing and you can make it work. I am cheering for you. If you are including a second language in your homeschool, tell me what it is down below. I want to cheer for you. I want to encourage you. Now, here's another ambitious question. What is the right time to introduce a third or a fourth language? I can't determine the right time for your family. For me, I decided to begin gently introducing a third language in kindergarten. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how that has gone in a moment. Young children do have ideal minds for language learning, but it's a lifelong journey. It's not something that, once you turn 6, it's too late. It's something that we continue doing throughout our whole lives. I've done much of my language learning in adulthood. I've studied 4 languages formally and do know quite a bit of the languages that I've studied. So it's an ongoing journey, Go ahead and start. If you already are a bilingual family though, one thing I would like to wait for is make sure your children are old enough to have that conception of different languages, and I think it can be helpful once they can label different languages, can help a little bit with confusion. So once your kids are able to say, this is Spanish, this is English, this is Chinese, once they can kind of label those and distinguish those, That to me can be helpful when you're adding the third or fourth language into the mix. And then on a practical level, how do you incorporate multiple languages learning within the homeschool schedule? And as a bilingual family, I totally understand how it can be really hard to wrap your mind around, realistically, what is adding a third language going to look? Because for bilingual families like ours, where we don't have any outside Spanish-speaking community, we just have one native Spanish speaker that's in my boys' everyday life. I am a lifelong Spanish learner who also uses Spanish. Our family's approach tends to be as much as possible when it comes to Spanish, as much as reasonably and practically possible. So we're playing Spanish music, we're reading Spanish books, we're changing the language on our cartoons into Spanish. We're incorporating it throughout the day, speaking as much as possible. You can't really do that with a third language, I can't switch into being, now I'm going to speak Chinese with them as much as possible, because that's taking away from me speaking Spanish with them as much as possible. So I understand the mental dilemma, because you can't really apply the as much as possible to multiple languages. So you're going to have to pick a different approach. And each family is going to have to choose the approach that fits their situation and their goals the best. For me, I've just chosen to approach our third language more as just an academic subject, something we are going to do consistently, something we are going to value, but it's not something where I'm aiming that, they need to make very fast progress and they need to know this as much as possible. So I'm treating Mandarin as a gentle, consistent school subject. I'm making space for it on our schedule, and maybe that's 10 to 15 minutes, but just gently, repeatedly doing it, consistently day after day, trusting in the process. Trusting in the process that we will get somewhere when we're consistent with it, but it doesn't need to be a race, and it doesn't need, our goals with language learning don't always need to be complete fluency. I think sometimes people feel like, if my child can't walk up to a stranger and have a full conversation, or if I can't read a high-level book on a language, it's not even worth studying a language. I think that is a total lie. Actually, a little bit of language learning can actually take you a long way. Learning the fundamentals in another language actually can take you very far, especially Chinese. Just use as an example, you can actually speak quite a bit once you get all the basics down. You can converse pretty well, and then you can use that foundation to build off of. So the relationships that your children have with the languages that they learn, their ability to go far in them will ultimately kind of depend on them, their own interests and personalities. What we're doing here in the early years is we're planting the seeds of the ability to have a relationship with these languages. We're laying the foundation. And maybe a child will decide to take it all the way and really pursue fluency, and maybe you'll have a circumstance of life where you have a wider language community that really helps build that fluency, or maybe not. Things are going to be different, but either way, I think even just getting the basics is very valuable. So I just want to encourage you that if you're thinking of adding a third language or a fourth language, don't necessarily let the idea of, reaching fluency might be too hard or might just not be possible. Don't let that idea stop you from doing it. There's a lot of middle ground between I know nothing about this language and native speaker level fluency, and that middle ground is valuable. We don't look down on people just because they're not 100% fluent in their second or third or fourth language. Language knowledge is valuable at any level, and that's something that I'm very passionate about and want to promote. Hey, if you want to add another language, go for it. And as a starting place, I would suggest, find a resource that you want to use that works for you, that you can stick to. Find a time in your schedule, even if it's just small, 10, 15 minutes. Start with that and just be consistent. That consistency is truly what will take you far versus always having to go back and repeat because you were inconsistent. Now, on that note, the last question, how are you incorporating Chinese and how are the goals different? Yes, as some of you know, we decided to start incorporating Chinese as a third language this past year during my son's kindergarten year. Now, I will say, perhaps choosing to start learning a third language during kindergarten when my son was learning to read in English, has been learning to read in Spanish, so getting that really big educational milestone of learning to read in two languages, and at the same time while I was pregnant, which was definitely a big mental drain for me, and I've noticed my ability for languages seems to take quite a dip when I'm pregnant and my brain is not functioning at full capacity. I don't know if anyone else experiences that, but it was definitely a struggle for me. Maybe the timing of all of that at once did not necessarily lend itself to the most productive year of Chinese learning. So I will say that caveat. I wouldn't say it was like the most spectacular. We have been using Little Chinese Learners, which is a website and a subscription. I have not decided if we are going to continue once that subscription is up. I do think it's a really, really neat program. I like the combination of the videos plus worksheets, games. You know, they've done a really cool job. They introduce culture, gem moments, and they explain etymology sometimes of characters and give devices to think about how to remember these characters. They integrate literacy at the same time as learning oral language. There's a lot of neat things about it. My caveat is just kind of like me, for one thing, of again, I don't tend to be as the person who's always wanting to pull out the computer during school, and also I don't tend to be the person who loves subscription services all that much. And also something I observe with my son is it's very, very exciting to learn on the computer. It's exciting to watch these fun videos and songs and all of that, but sometimes I wonder if the learning gets a little bit lost in the excitement of it all. In the excitement of being on the computer and playing a game, you just figure out how to game the game versus actually learning what you were supposed to be learning from the computer game. That's just something I notice. It's not a criticism of Little Chinese Learners per se, but something I've noticed about myself and about my son that make me wonder. I'm not sure the extent to which I'll continue. Maybe we'll switch and take a different tack for a while. Maybe just play with some flashcards, do some oral learning, do some whiteboard games, practice a little bit more on conversation for a while. I haven't yet decided what we're gonna do. I still have some time before my subscription runs out. But I will update you on that. And yes, the goals are different with incorporating this third language in our homeschool. With Spanish, the reason we're incorporating that is because it's their heritage. My husband and I are a mixed culture marriage, so our kids are coming from two different cultures. And I'm the one running the homeschool, but I also do want to equip them to connect with their heritage, to connect with their culture, with their extended family. I don't want them to feel like, hey, I'm Mexican, my dad's Mexican, but I can't even speak Spanish. I have known many, many people who don't speak their parents' native languages, who don't speak the same language as their extended family, and I wanted to equip them to have that real connection to their heritage, to grow up knowing the songs of their culture and their heritage, the foods, and kind of the cultural knowledge that comes through language. So we have a different goal there. And then Chinese, it is a community language, one of the several community languages around us. It's not something that we're needing to rely on for communication every day. We live in a place where English is very widely spoken, but many languages are widely spoken. So Chinese is something we see in our community. I want to equip my children with curiosity about what they see, and not just to look at Chinese characters and think, oh, I can't read that. That looks totally different from any alphabet I'm familiar with, but to understand how they work and to see, I see the pieces coming together. I see the radicals and the phonetics. I want them to get the basics idea of how Chinese works. I want them to get the basics of vocabulary, communication, being able to, start with simple conversations and, grow from there. How far they go in it probably will ultimately depend on them. I'm not gonna, say we have to reach fluency in every language we study, like I was just talking about, but I do want to allow them to understand this, give them the basics and the tools for understanding this really incredible, really cool language, and kind of share my excitement over it because it is a subject that I love studying. All right, now I'll have my husband join me. And now I have my husband joining me, which is a pretty rare sight these days on the channel. But hello, thanks for joining for this Q&A. I asked him to join because several of you had questions that kind of involved him, so I felt like I shouldn't totally just speak for him. So first question is, what's your involvement in our homeschool, or are you involved in any way?
I am quite involved. As soon as I get home, I like to review what they've learned. The boys are eager and excited to show me projects that they've made, or the stuff is already laid out on the dinner table, and so I get to review, the worksheets that they've done.
So if they've done certain worksheets, I typically just leave them on the dining table, and then while we're eating dinner or after dinner, then he'll pick them up and be like, hey, what was this about? So we really have a habit of talking about what we did and what we learned that day.
Yeah, it's mostly the review. It's not the initial lecturing, teaching of the boys. I'm obviously not here. Rachel does all of that.
But it's really powerful. I think it's really powerful and meaningful for kids to have that chance to talk about it with you and share what they've learned with their dad, with someone else.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy it. I'm actually impressed sometimes. Like, wow, they're already doing this, and so it's nice to see that. Like, okay.
And I guess, how do you shape our homeschool, or what do you like? Our homeschool, both of us bring something to our priorities in homeschool. How do you kind of impact that or shape that?
Well, I mean, I didn't grow up being homeschooled, so I feel like I'd maybe add a little bit more of what I think is important. Perhaps, hey, today we're going to look at the car engine, or we're going to mix some cement. Actually, we might do that this weekend, and more on the let's learn something as we have to improve the home or do some actual needed work.
Life skills.
Yeah.
Wash the car, vacuum the car, all the all the active kind of stuff. Or you've taught them a lot of the athletic skills, gymnastic skills. Hey, we're gonna practice doing handstands. Randomly at night. Yeah,
so the things that I enjoy, I bring them with me. So I do. We'll go to the gym, and we'll go to the playground and play soccer. I like them to do a little bit of risk taking. Yes.
So not so much in the homeschool side as far as all those things, but that's all part of the richness of life, and that's all part of things that are important to us for our kids to learn as they grow up.
Yeah.
You also, of course, bring the Spanish element. Like if it was just me, I would not be emphasizing Spanish so much in our homeschool. That's very much sparked by you and funded by you. That's been a priority largely because of you, your culture, how you grew up. And you help with that a lot.
Yeah.
What do you do to help with Spanish?
I mean, we'll read books, and then I read to them in Spanish at night. Even if the book's in English, I'll just translate it, and they totally understand it, and they know when I'm changing it. Everything
when
is
you're reading it wrong.
Everything is done in Spanish with them, and they'll 100% understand.
So you speak to them in Spanish quite a bit, not 100%.
Yeah, I speak to them about 90% in Spanish. Yep.
And you make our playlists for the car, so you're playing Spanish music. We
all the
learned
Spanish
a lot
music.
of Mexican oldies.
Lots of oldies.
They can sing along to and are very familiar with. Vamos a la playa. We play when we're going to the beach. So they know. They don't want to listen to that one unless we're going to the beach.
Yep. We recently went to a circus about a week ago, and they were playing
a certain song
in Spanish that I haven't. Yeah, and they were so happy
because they recognized it. So, how do you think about budgeting for our homeschool, or how do you impact the decision of what's appropriate to spend?
I am always of the you have all the freedom to purchase what you want, what you need, what makes life easier, what makes teaching easier. And I do work at a school, and I feel like we have budgeting and we have resources, and the philosophy of my administrators is to buy what you need to make teaching effective and better and easier for you. And I think it's the same thing here. Obviously, homeschool resources are not expensive. I mean, $100 for something is not that bad. And so is there a budget limit? I've always told her, it's like, as long as it's not more than a private Christian international school budget, then we're okay. But I don't think we'll ever reach that.
Not even close. So yeah, there's never been a time when I've come to you like, hey, I'm thinking of getting this, and you're like, no. So yeah, there's like, I'll come to you with, hey, I discovered this, I'm thinking about this curriculum, I'm thinking about spending the money. Always you're the person who's like, yes, just get it.
Yes,
Like,
just get it.
just get it, because I'm the one who will think about it for a while, think, am I really gonna get enough use out of it? And you're the one who's like, just go ahead and get it. Like, in the long term of things, with teaching multiple children, like, you're gonna get a lot of use out of it.
Yes, yes.
And then I talk a lot about gifted education, gifted homeschooling on this channel, coming from my background of being gifted, and some people were curious, were you also coming from a background of being gifted in school growing up?
No, I was not gifted at all. Although my GPA was 3.87, I think. I think that was in high school. And then I was number 51 or 52 out of 550 students in my class. But it doesn't mean much because I was definitely not gifted. I just did the work. And it wasn't until I got to college. But yeah, I mean, definitely the word giftedness. I can see how my son is learning math and writing in English, and I'm just like, oh wow, that's pretty good. And just his love for learning.
And when you first met me, you could tell some differences in the way we approached schoolwork and college, because we met in college. You noticed very quickly that I was approaching college coursework very differently than you or almost anyone.
Yeah, so one of the I mean, I wasn't gifted. I mean, there's, those who know how to learn, and then there's the giftedness that I did not.
Well, you can learn how to learn, but giftedness is more of like getting to this level of your mind just makes connections and kind of is wired a little bit differently to leap around stuff that other people need to put more work into learning.
No, Rachel married a normal person like me. Normal is good.
Normal is good. Normal is very good. I need normal.
So that's me. Normal.
Opposites in many ways can be very complementary and helpful in life. Yes. We have very different skills, and I think both of those bring a lot of benefit to our homeschool. And we are actually both work in education, so we can both kind of bring our own skills and expertise in that way. Well, thank you so much for joining and being willing to give us a few minutes, show your face on here. He's a very present part of our homeschool and family life. That's really important for us to spend a lot of time as a family together. He just doesn't show up here on YouTube all that much.
All right, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for sending all your questions and letting me chat about these nerdy homeschool topics for a while with you. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and do subscribe to 7 and All for more fun and nerdy homeschool videos. I'll see you later. Bye.